Elisa from Elisa's Back Porch Design, and today on Seems So Crazy, I'm going to give you a few of my binding tips. It seems like binding causes people a little bit of difficulty. They get worried about getting their binding on correctly. So I'm going to show you just some of the tips that I've learned over time having sewn on bindings before. I've made my binding and I've rolled it up just to make it easy to use. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put it onto our quilt top that's already been squared up and the edges are trimmed. And we want to sew this on. And so the first question we would want to know is, where do we sew? And you could do a couple of things. You could do a test basting to find out where that you want it to be. We have a 2.5 inch binding, so I'm probably going to want a good 5/8 inch of a seam. So one of the things I can do is place a pin there and then practice folding it around to see if that is going to be the correct position. But one of the things that actually might be easier is if I actually do some test sewing just with a basting stitch to see. And then you kind of learn on your machine where is the good place to have your needle and where to sew it so that you have enough that it'll fold around. When I start binding, I want to leave a good tail left on the binding so that I can be able to join it and start somewhere in the middle of the quilt, not too close to an edge and not too far away. If you have some area next to your quilt where you can maneuver, a flat surface so that it's not hanging and pulling off of the edge, it's going to make it a little easier when it's not, pulling you away. Place this under my machine, and I'm going to go just a few inches. And I'm going to pull that out and actually do a test to see if I fold this around and push this to the back. Then when I come to sew this is where I'm going to sew, if I'm doing this by machine, is right here. I can place the pin there and see that I've got quite a bit of room there. So I might actually want to take a little bit bigger seam when I am sewing this on. So I'm going to do another little test run. Back up and go right where I was. And I'm going to move my needle position over and take a few more stitches. And again, pull this out to see where this will place me when this is pressed over and turned around. Again, I will then place my needle right into the seam here and see that this is actually a really good spot for me. If I were sewing that, I'm going to be, I actually might go a little bit less when I am sewing this, because I don't want it to be so skimpy that I have a hard time. So I would move my needle over one more, back the way I came, and I will come back later and rip this out and sew it the correct seam that I've now determined. But very carefully place the edge of your binding next to the edge of your quilt. And you want to be careful that you're not pulling this too tightly or leaving it too loose. It's almost a taut without stretching it. And what I'm going to do is sew to my corner. And I want to stop about the same distance as my seam allowance is. Don't be too worried about it, because you can actually back out some of the stitches if you need to. So I sew almost to the end, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this binding back, and what I want this to be is a straight line going in this direction, and this is where I could actually pull some of these stitches out so that this comes out perfectly matching with the corner. Then if you need to, when you're first learning how to do this, you can actually place a little pin right here, and then you would fold this back over, and this is what it would look like. This needs to be aligned right here. Then I will turn this around. You can move this pin so that it is holding that in place. And now I'm going to start sewing this direction, and you can actually start sewing right from the end. Make sure that this is lined up and continue sewing around. Now I'd go all the way around, do all 4 corners. But I want to go ahead and show you some more steps. Trim your threads off. On this corner, when you come back, you can see how this is going to open up and do a nice mitered corner. So that when you turn this to the back, and what I like to do is I like to press this. Once my binding is completely sewn on, I will take the iron and I will come back and press this out, and that helps me get a nice crisp edge. Then I will place one side down and the other side over. And this will be the opposite side that is on the front, and that helps it to lie smooth so you don't have a huge bump. Then you can place a pin here. And I would place pins on all 4 corners, and the rest of this I'm going to hand put in place. I don't like to deal with a lot of pins when I'm sewing the binding. Another little trick that I like to do is I use what's called an edge foot. It has this little edge right here. I place that on my machine, and this allows me to fold this over and place this under the machine, and what's going to happen is this little edge is going to go right in the crease between my binding and the quilt. So the needle, again, I would adjust that to where the needle is going to fall right into that crease. And then I like to just hand move this over, and I do a little bit at a time, and I feel with my finger to make sure I can kind of feel a little bump there. If this is too far over this way, I can't feel the fabric. But I've kind of pulled this over. I can feel that it's there. Don't pull it too tight or you're going to have it skinny parts and fat parts on your binding. But push it over, then take a few stitches. Then again, I would take my hands, press it over, and so that I can feel that, and take a few stitches. And I would work all the way around the quilt in this way, and using pins at the corners to make sure that I catch all of the edge. Now, even though I do this a lot, every once in a while you can actually miss. And what I do is after I'm done, I come back and I look and I see, did I actually catch all of the quilt here? And if there's pieces that I missed, I can come back with the seam ripper and fold those over and actually go over them again. But you can, if you reach this part where you've sewn it on, you can flip this over and actually sew this by hand. I just do so many bindings that I find it goes a lot quicker to be able to use the machine to do this. But you go around with your machine and your binding is sewn on. Then all you have to do is add a label and add a sleeve if you like, and your quilt top is done. So I hope this has helped you, give you some ideas on how you can add the binding to your quilt. And I hope to see you again at my website at backporchdesign.com, and also come back to see more videos at Seam So Crazy.